Digest to know about American character. Introduction. In September 17, 1996, worn out by burdens of the presidency and attacks of political foes, George Washington announced his decision not to seek a third term. With the assistance of Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, Washington composed in a farewell address his political testament to the nation, designed to inspire and guide future generations. The address also set forth Washington's defense of his administration's record and embodied a classic statement of Federalist doctrine. Washington's principal concern was for the safety of the 8-year-old Constitution. He believed that the stability of the Republic was threatened by the forces of geographical sectionalism, political factionalism, and interference by foreign powers in the nation's domestic affairs. He urged Americans to subordinate sectional jealousies to common national interest. Writing at a time before political parties had become accepted as vital extra-constitutional opinion-focusing agencies, Washington felt that they carried the seeds of the nation's destruction through petty factorialism. Although Washington was in no sense the father of American isolationism, since he recognized the necessity of temporary association for extraordinary emergencies, alliances with other countries, connections that he warned would inevitably be subversive of Americans' national interest. Washington did not publicly deliver his farewell address. It first appeared on September the 19th, 1796, in the Philadelphia Daily American Advertiser and then in papers around the country. In January 1862, with the Constitution endangered by civil war, 1,000 citizens of Philadelphia petitioned Congress to commemorate the forthcoming 130th anniversary of George Washington's birth by providing that the farewell address of Washington read out on the morning of that day in one or the others of the House of Congress. Both houses agreed assembled in the House of Representatives chamber on February the 22nd, 1962, while Secretary of the Senate John W. Forney rendered the farewell address very effectively, as one observer recorded. The practice of reading the farewell address did not immediately become a tradition. The address was first read in regular legislative session of the Senate in 1888 and the House in 1899. The House continued the practice until 1984. Since 1893, the Senate has observed Washington's birthday by selecting one of its members to read the farewell address. The assignment alternates between members of each political party. As a conclusion of each reading, the appointed senator inscribes his or her name and brief remarks in a black leather-bound book maintained by the Secretary of the Senate. The version of the address printed here is taken from the original of the final manuscript in the New York Public Library, provided a courtesy of the papers of George Washington. The only changes have been to modernize spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. Now let's begin. Washington's farewell address is talking about the Americans' isolationism. Is talking about the isolationism. Washington was not in no sense the father of Americans' isolationism, since he recognized the necessity of temporary association for extraordinary emergencies. He did counsel against the establishment of permanent alliance with other countries. So don't say that you are American allies, because American is isolationism. Isolationism. Let's begin. Washington's farewell address. Friends and fellow citizens. The period for a new election of a citizen to administer the executive government of the United States being not far distant, and the time actually arrived when your thoughts must be explored in designating the person who is to be closed with that important trust. It appears to me proper, especially as it may conduce to a more distant expression of the public voice, that I should now apprise you of the resolution I have formed to decline being considered among the number of those out of whom a choice is to be made. I beg you at the same time to do me the justice to be assured that this resolution has not been taken without a strict regard to all the considerations pertaining to the relation which binds a dutiful citizen to his country, and that in withdrawing the tender of service which silence in my situation might imply, I am influenced by no diminution of zeal for your future interest, no deficiency of grateful respect for your past kindness, but am supported by a full conviction that the step is compatible with both the acceptance of and the continuation herein. The office to which your suffrage you have twice called me have been a uniform sacrifice of inclination to the opinion of duty and to a deference of what appears to be your desire. I constantly hoped that it would have been much earlier in my power, consistently with motives which I was not at liberty to disregard, to return to what retirement from which I had been reluctantly withdrawn. The strength of my inclination to do this, previous to the last election, have even led to the preparation of an address to carry it to you, but a mature reflection on the then perplexed and critical posture of our affairs with foreign nations, and the unanimous advice of persons entitled to my confidence impelled me to abandon the idea. I rejoice that the state of your concerns, external as well as internal, no longer renders the pursuit of inclination incompatible with the sentiment of duty or propriety, and am persuaded whatever partiality may be retained for my services, that in the present circumstances of our country you will not disapprove my determination to retire. The impression with which I first undertook the arduous trust were explained on the proper occasion. In the discharge of this trust, I will only say that I have, with good intentions, contributed towards the organization and administration of the government, the best exertions of which a very valuable judgment was capable, not unconscious in the outset of the inferiority of my qualifications. Experience in my own eye, perhaps still more in the eyes of others, has strengthened the motives to diffidence of myself. And every day the increasing weight of years admonished me more and more that the shade of retirement is as necessary to me as it will be to welcome, satisfied that if any circumstances have given peculiar value to my services, they were temporary. I have the consolation to believe that while choice and prudence invite me to quit the political scene, patriotism does not forbid it. In looking forward to the moment which is intended to terminate the career of my public life, my feelings do not permit me to suspend the deep acknowledgment of that debt of gratitude which I owe to my beloved country for the many honors it has conferred upon me, still more for the steadfast confidence with which it has supported me, and for the opportunities I have thence enjoyed of manifesting my inviolable attachment by services faithful to preserving, though useful unequal to my zeal. If benefits have resulted in our country from these services, let it always be remembered to your praise, and as instructive example you are in our annals. And under circumstances in which the passions agitated in every direction were liable to mislead, amidst the appearance something dubious, vicissitudes of fortune, often discouraging in situations in which not unfrequently want of success has countenanced the spirit of criticism. The constancy of your support was the essential prop of the efforts and a guarantee of the plans by which they were affected. Profoundly penetrated with this idea, I shall carry it with me to my grave as a strong incitement to unceasing vows that heavens may continue to you the choicest tokens of its benevolence, that your union and brotherly affection may be perpetual, that the free constitution, which is the work of your hands, may be sacredly maintained, that the administration in every department may be stamped with wisdom and virtue, that in fine the happiness of the people of these states, under the auspices of liberty, may be made complete by so careful a preservation and so prudent a use of this blessing as will acquire to them the glory of recommending it to the applause, the affection, and the adoption of every nation which is yet a stranger to it. Here perhaps I thought I ought to stop, but a solitude for your affair which cannot end with my life, and the appreciation of danger natural to that solitude urges me in an occasion like the present to offer to you, to your solemn contemplation, and to recommend to your frequent review some sentiments which are the results of many reflection, of no inconsiderable observation, and which appeals to me all important to the permanency of your felicity as a people. There will be offered to you with the more freedom as you can only see in them the disinterested warnings of the partial friend, who can possibly have no personal motive to bias his counsel, nor can I forget, as an encouragement to it, your indulgent reception of my sentiments on a formal and not dissimilar occasion, interwoven as is the love of liberty with every ligament of your hearts. No recommendation of mine is necessary to fortify or confirm the attachment. The united... Oh, I feel cold. I should take on my sock before I continue. Interwoven is the love of liberty with every ligament of your hearts. Not a recommendation of mine is necessity to fortify or confirm the attachment. The unity of government which constitutes you one people is also now dear to me. It is justly so, for it is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home and your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. So, but as it is very easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, many pains will be taken, many artifices employed to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth, and this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, and though often covertly and insidiously directed. It is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness, that you should cherish a cordial, habitual, and immovable attachment to it, accustoming yourself to think and speak of it as of the palladium of your political safety and prosperity, watching for its preservation with jealousy, anxiety, discountenancing whatever may suggest even a suspicion that it can, in any event, be abandoned, and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of the country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts. For this you have every inducement of sympathy and interest. Citizens by birth or choice of a modern country, that country has a right to concentrate your affections. The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. With slight shades of difference, you have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles. You have in a common cause fought and triumphed together. The independence and liberty you possess are the work of joint counsels and joint efforts, of common dangers, suffering, and successes. But these considerations, however powerfully they adjust themselves to your sensibility, are greatly outweighed by those who apply more immediately to your interest. Here, every portion of our country finds the most commanding motives for carefully guarding and preserving the union of the whole. The North is an unrestrained intercourse with the South, protected by the equal laws of a common movement, finds in the introduction of the latter great additional resources of maritime and commercial enterprise and the precious materials of manufacturing industry. The South in the same intercourse, benefiting by the agency of the North, sees its agriculture grow and its e-commerce expand, turning partly into its own channels. The seamen of the North, it finds its particular navigation invigorated, and while it contributes in different ways to nourish and increase the general mass of the national navigation, it looks forward to the protection of a maritime strength to which itself is unequally adapted. The East is like an intercourse with the West already finds, and in the progressive improvements of interior communications by land and water, will more and more find a valuable vent for the commodities which it brings from abroad of manufacturers at home. The West derives from the East supplies requisite to its growth and comfort, and what is perhaps of still greater consequence, it must of necessity all the secure employment of indispensable outlets for its own productions to the weight, influence, and the future maritime strength of the Atlantic side of the Union, directed by an indissoluble community of interest as one nation. Any other tenure by which the West can hold this essential advantage, whether derived from its own separate strength or from an apostate or unnatural connection with any foreign power, must be intrinsically precarious. Foreign power, okay, be intrinsically precarious with any unnatural connection with any foreign power. Any other tenure by which the West can hold this essential advantage, whether derived from its own separate strength or from an apostate or unusual connection with an offer, must be intrinsically held precarious. While then every part of our country thus feels an immediate and particular interest in union, all the parts combined cannot fail to find in the united mass of means and efforts greater strength, greater resource, proportionately greater security from external danger, a less frequent interruption of their peace by foreign nations. And what is of inestimable value, they must derive from union and exemption from those brawls and wars between themselves, which so frequently afflict neighboring countries not tied together by the same government, which their own rivalship alone would be sufficient to produce, but which opposite foreign alliance attachments and intrigues would stimulate and embitter. Hence, likewise, they will avoid the necessity of those overgrown military establishments, which under any form of government are inauspicious to liberty, and which are to be regarded as particularly hostile to republican liberty. In this sense, it is that your union ought to be considered as a main prop of your liberty, and that the love of the one ought to endear to you the preservation of the other. These considerations speak a persuasive language to airy reflecting and virtuous mind, and exhibit the continuance of the Union as a primary object of patriotic desire. Is there a doubt whether a common government can embrace so large a sphere? Let experience solve it. To listen to mere speculation in such a case were criminal. We are authorized to hope that a proper organization of the whole, with the auxiliary agency of governments for the respective subdivisions, will afford a happy issue to the experiment. It is well worth a fair and full experiment. With such powerful and obvious motives to union affecting all parts of our country, our experience should not have demonstrated its impracticability. There will always be reason to distrust the patriotism of those who in any quarter, any endeavor to weaken its hands. So Trump is a patriot. In contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as a matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations. Northern and southern, Atlantic and western, whence designing man may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference of local interest and views. One of the experiments of party to acquire influence within particular district is to misrepresent the opinion and the aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourself too much against the jealousy and the heart burnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. The inhabitants of our western country have lately had a useful lesson on this head. They have seen in the negotiation by the executive and in the unanimous ratifications by the Senate of the treaty with Spain, and in the universal satisfaction at that event throughout the United States, a decisive proof how unfounded were the suspicions propagated among them of a policy in the general government and in the Atlantic state unfriendly to their interest regard to the Mississippi. They have been witnesses to the formation of two treaties, that with Great Britain and that with Spain, which secured to them everything they could desire in respect to our foreign relation towards concerning their prosperity. Will it not be their wisdom to rely for the preservation of this advantage of the Union by which they were procured? Will they not henceforth be deaf to those advisers, if such they are, serve them from the brethren and crush them with alliance to the efficacy and permanency of your union? A government for the whole is indispensable. No alliance, however strict, however the parts can be an adequate substitute. They must inevitably experience the infractions of interruptions which all alliances in all time have experienced. Sensible of this momentous truth, you have improved upon your first essay by the adoption of a constitution of government better calculated than your former for an intimate union and for the efficacious management of your common concerns. This government, the offspring of your own choice, uninfluenced and unawed, adopted upon full investigation and mature deliberation, completely free in its principles and in the distribution of its powers, on uniting security with energy and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, has a just claim to your confidence and your support. Respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, and acquiescence in its measures are duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political systems is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitution of government. But the constitution which at any time exists, until changed, by an explicit or authentic act of the whole people, is secretly obligatory upon all. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. All obstruction to the exclusion of the law, all combination and association under whatever plausible character with the real design to direct, control, counteract, and all the regular deliberation and action of the constitutional authorities are destructive of this fundamental principle of fatal independency. Let's finish it. Okay. All the obstructions to the execution of war, of the law, all combinations and association under whatever plausible character with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or all the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities are destructive of this fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. They serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation or the will of a party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community, and according to the alternate triumph of different parties, to make the public administration the mirror of the ill concerted and incongruous projects of a faction, rather than the organ of considered and wholesome plans digested by common councils and modified by mutual interest. However, combinations and associations of the above description may now and then answer popular aims. They are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning and ambitious and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of the government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Towards the preservation of our government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular opposition to its not acknowledged authority, but also that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles, however spacious the pretext. One method of assault may be to effect in the form of the constitutional alternation which will impel the energy of the system and thus to undermine what cannot be directly overthrown. In other changes to which you may be invited, remember that time and habit are at least as necessary to fix the true character of governments as of other human institutions. That experience is the surest standard by which to test the real tendency of the existing constitution of a country. That facility in changes upon the credit of mere hypothesis and opinion exposes to perpetual change from the endless variety of hypothesis and opinion. And remember especially that for the efficient the management of your common interest in a country so extensive as ours, a government is as much rigor as is consistent with the perfect security of liberty is indispensable. Liberty itself will find in such a government, with powers properly distributed and adjusted, is surest guardian. It is indeed little else than a man, while the government is too feeble to withstand the enterprise of faction, to confine each member of the society within the limits prescribed by the law, and to maintain all in the secure and tranquil enjoyment of the rights of personal property. I have already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state, with particular reference to the founding of them on geographical discriminations. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. This spirit, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its roots in the strongest passions of the human mind. It exists under different shapes in all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed, but in those of the popular form, it is seen in its greatest rankness and is truly their worst enemy. The alternate domination of one fraction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries have perpetuated the most horrid enormity, is itself a frightful deposition, but this leads to at least to a more formal and permanent deposition. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, and sooner or later the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this deposition to the purpose of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty, without looking forward to an extremity of this kind, which nevertheless ought not to be entirely out of sight. The common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and the duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. It serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. It opens the door to foreign influence and corruption, which find facilitated access to the government itself through the channels of party passions. Thus, the policy and the will of one country are subjected to the policy and the will of another. There is an opinion that parties in free countries are useful checks upon the administration of the government and serve to keep alive the spirit of liberty. This, within certain limits, is probably true, and in governments of a monarchical cast of patriotism may look with indulgence, if not with favor, upon the spirit of party, but in those of the popular character in governments purely elective, it is a spirit not to be encouraged. From their natural tendency, it is certain there will always be enough of that spirit for every salutary purpose, and there being constant danger of excess, the effort ought to be, by force of public opinion, to mitigate and assuage it, a fire not to be quenched. It demands a uniform vigilance to prevent its bursting into a flame, lest instead of warming, it should consume. It is important likewise that the habits of thinking in a free country should inspire caution in those entrusted with its administration to confine themselves with the respective constitutional spheres, a voice in the exercise in the power of one department to encroach one upon another. The spirit of encroachment tends to consolidate the powers of all the departments in one, and thus to create whatever the form of government, a real despotism. A just estimate of that love of power and the proneness to abuse it which predominates in the human heart is sufficient to satisfy us of the truth of its disposition, the necessity of reciprocal checks in the exercise of political power by dividing and distributing it into different depositories and constituting each the guardian of the public will against the invasion by the others, has been evinced by experiments, ancient and modern, some of them in our country and under our own eyes. To preserve them must be as necessary as to institute them. If we, the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of the constitutional powers be in any particularly wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment in the way which the Constitution designates, but let there be no change by usurpation. For though this, in one instance, may be the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. The president must always greatly overbalance in permanent evil any partial or transient benefit which the use can at any time yield. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert those great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men of citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume cannot trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of the religion obligation desert the oath which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice, and let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever can be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. It is substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. The rule indeed extends within more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundation of the fabric, promote them as an object of primary importance. Institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge, in proportion as the structure of a government gives force to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. As a very important source of strength and security, cherish public credit. One method of preserving it is to use it as sparingly as possible, avoiding occasion of expense by cultivating peace, but remembering also that timely disbursement to prepare for danger frequently prevent much greater disbursement to repair it, avoiding likewise the accumulation of debt, not only by shunning occasions of expenses, but by vigorous exertion in time of peace to discharge the debt which unavoidable wars may have occasioned, not ungenerously throwing upon posterity the burden which we ourselves ought to bear. The execution of these maxims belongs to your representatives, but it is necessary that public opinion should cooperate to facilitate to them the performance of their duty. It is essential that you should practically bear in mind that towards the payment of debt there must be revenue. That to have revenue there must be taxes, that no taxes can be devised which are not more or less inconvenient and unpleasant, that the intrinsic embarrassment inseparable from the selection of the proper objects, which is always a choice of difficulties, ought to be a decisive motive for a candid construction of the conduct of the government in making it, and for a spirit of acquiescence in the measures for obtaining a revenue which the public exigencies may at times dictate. Observe good faith and justice towards all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Religion and morality enjoin this conduct, and can it be that good policy does it equally enjoin it? It will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and at no distant period a great nation to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by an exalted justice and benevolence. Who can doubt that, in the course of time and thing, the fruits of such a plan would richly repay any temporary advantages which may be lost by a steadily adherence to it? Can it be that Providence has not connected the permanently felicity of a nation with its virtue and experiment. In my city, okay. you get up so early, Robert S. In our city is 9 p.m. Essential than the permanent invertebrate antipathy against particular nations and passionate attachment for others should be excluded, and that in place of them just and amicable feelings towards all should be cultivated. The nation which indulges towards another an habitual hatred or a habitual fondness is in some degree a slave. Wow, that is so wise. The nation which indulges towards another a habitual hatred or a habitual fondness is in some degree a slave. It is a slave to its animosity and or to its affection, either of which is sufficient to lead it astray from its duty and its interests. Antipathy in one nation against another disposes and each more readily to offer insult and injury, to lay hold of slight horses of umbrage, and to be haughty and intractable when accidental or trifling occasion of dispute occur. Hence, frequent collisions, obstinate, envenomed, and bloody contests. The nations prompted by ill will and resentment sometimes impels to war the government. Contrary to the best calculations of policy, the government sometimes participate in the national propensity and adopt through passion what reason would reject. At other times, it makes the animosity of the nation subservient to project of hostility instigated by pride, ambition, and other sinister and pernicious motives. The peace often, sometimes, perhaps the liberty of nations have been the victim. So likewise, a passionate attachment of one country for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favorite nation, facilitating the illusion of an imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one the enemies of the others, betraying the former into the participation in the quarrels and wars of the latter without adequate inducement and justification. It leads also to concessions to the favorite nation of privilege denied to others, which is apt doubly to injure the nation, making the concessions by unnecessary parting with what ought to have been retained, and by exciting jealousy, ill will, and a disposition to retaliate in the parties from whom equal privilege are withheld. And it gives to ambitions corrupted and deluded citizens fallacy to betray or sacrifice the interests of their own country without odium, sometimes even with popularity, gilding with the appearance of a virtuous sense of obligation, a commendable deference for public opinion, or a laudable zeal for public good, the base of foolish compliance of ambition, corruption, and infatuation as avenues to foreign influence in innumerable ways. Such attachments are particularly alarming to the truly enlightened and independent patriot. How many opportunities do they afford to tamper with domestic affections, to practice the art of seduction, to mislead public opinion, to influence or awe the public councils? Such an attachment of a small or weak towards a great and powerful nation dooms the former to be the satellite of the latter. Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens. The jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake. Since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of republican government, but that jealousy to be useful must be impartial, else it becomes the instrument of the very influence to be avoided. Instead of a defense against it, excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those whom they accurate to see danger only on one side and so to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interest. The great value of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. So far as we have already formed the engagement, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here let us stop. Europe has a set of primary interests, which to us have none, or a very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics, or the ordinary combinations and the collisions of her friendship or enmities. Our detached and distant situation invites and enables us to pursue a different course. If we remain one people under an efficient government, the period is not far off when we may defy material injury from external annoyance, when we may take such an attitude as will cause the neutrality we may at any time resolve upon to be scrupulously respected. When belligerent nations under the impossibility of making acquisitions upon us will not lightly hazard the giving us provocation, when we may choose peace or war as our interest, guided by justice, shall counsel, why forego the advantage of so peculiar a situation? Why quit our own to stand upon foreign ground? Why, by interweaving our destiny with that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice? It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliance with any portion of the foreign world, so far I mean as we are now at liberty to do it, for let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagement. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. I repeat it, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense. But in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them, taking care always to keep ourselves by suitable establishment on a respectable defensive posture. We may safely trust to temporary alliances for extraordinary emergencies. Harmony, liberal intercourse with all nations are recommended by policy, humanity, and interest, but even our commercial policy should hold an equal and impartial hand, neither seeking nor granting exclusive favors or preferences, consulting the natural course of things, diffusing and diversifying by gentle means the streams of commerce, but forcing nothing, establishing with power so disposed in order to give to trade a stable course, to define the rights of our merchants, and to enable the government to support them. Conventional rules of intercourse, the best that present circumstances and mutual opinion, will permit, but temporary and liable to be from time to time abandoned or varied, as experience and circumstances should dictate, constantly keeping in view that it is a folly in one nation to look for disinterested favors from another, that it must pay with a portion of its independence for whatever it may accept under that character, that by such acceptance it may place itself in the conditions of having given equivalents of nominal favors, and yet of being reproached with ingratitude for not giving more. There may be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. It is an illusion which experience must cure, which a just pride ought to discard. In offering to you, my countrymen, these counsels of an older affectionate friend, I dare not hope they will not make the strong and nothing, but I could wish that they will control the usual current of the passions, and prevent our nation from running the course which has hitherto marked the destiny of nations. But if I may even flatter myself that they may be productive of some partial benefit, some occasional good, and that they may now and then recur to moderate of the fury of party spirit, to warn against the mischiefs of foreign intrigue, and to guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism. This hope will be a full recompense for the solicitude for your welfare, by which we have been dictated how far in the discharge of my official duties I have been guided by the principles which have been delineated. The public records of other evidence of my conduct must witness to you and to the world, to myself, the assurance of our own conscience is that I have at least believed myself to be guided by them. In relation to the still subsisting war in Europe, my proclamation of the 22nd of April 1793 is the index to my plan, sanctioned by your approving voice and by that of your representatives in both houses of Congress. The spirit of that measure has continually governed me, uninfluenced by any attempts to deter or divert me from it. After deliberate examination with the aid of the best lights I could obtain, I was well satisfied that our country, under all the circumstances of the case, had a right to take, and was bound in duty and interest to take, a neutral position. Having taken it, I determined, as far as should depend upon me, to maintain it with meditation, perseverance, and firmness, the considerations which respect the right, and to hold this conduct. It is not necessary on this occasion to detail. I will only observe that, according to my understandings of the matter, that right, so far from being denied by any of the belligerent powers, has been virtually admitted by all. The duty of holding a neutral conduct may be inferred, without anything more, from the obligation which justice and humanity impose on every nation, in cases which it is free to act, to maintain inviolate the relations of peace and amity towards other nations. The inducement of interest for observing that conduct will best be referred to your own reflections and experience. With me, a predominant motive has been to endeavor to gain time to our country to settle and mature its yet recent institutions, and to progress without interruption to that degree of strength and consistency which is necessary to give it, humanly speaking, command of its own fortunes. Though in reviewing the instances of my administration I am unconscious of intentional error, I am nevertheless too sensible to my defect not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. Whatever there may be, I fervently beseech the Almighty to avert and mitigate the evils to which they may tend. It should also carry with me the hope that my country will never cease to view them with indulgence, and that, after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service with an upright zeal, the force of incompetent abilities will be consigned to oblivion, as myself must soon be to the mansions of rest, relying on its kindness in this as in other things, and actuated by that fervent love towards it which is so natural to a man who wills in it the native soul of himself and his progenitors of several generations. I anticipate with pleasing expectation that retreat in which I promise myself to realize without alloy the sweet enjoyment of partaking in the midst of my fellow citizens the benign influence of good laws on a free government, the ever favorite object of my heart, and the happy reward, as I trust, of our mutual care, labor, and dangerous United Kingdoms. This is George Washington's farewell address. It is talking about isolationism of American. Trump is a typical American.